This is Daniela from earthforall.net. I'm going to be interviewing my husband Bruce on the lost city in the jungle. He is also my co-author in several books. We're going to be talking about this fascinating subject. So Bruce, tell me, how did you come across this topic?
It was actually 18 months ago. We were included in a meeting between two of our friends that are local shamanic healers and two acquaintances of theirs, and we ended up sort of involved in this conversation in which these other people raised this subject of the lost city which they had visited on a trek. At that point, of course, we were interested, but I didn't really dig too deep. I mean, they mentioned that they had suspicions that this was a city of giants rather than normal people. I was straight away interested. I've spent the last 20 years researching ancient mysteries, lost civilizations and the supernatural. So, I mean, immediately did get my attention, but for one reason or another, which is a very long story, I didn't actually delve any further into this for another 18 months. I was pretty bogged down with some supernormal events, to be honest, that were happening in our personal lives, which actually led to the publishing of two books, which are 2012 Rising, The Last Soul Kin, and also Ancient Aliens in Australia. At the completion of these two projects, however, I was sort of freed up to find a new project, and I remembered this sort of story of this city in the jungle. So we kind of chased up the people, and we saw some very interesting photographs, and from there was sort of, basically, I suppose, convinced that this was a real find, and we decided to kind of investigate a bit more. And we actually ended up meeting with another member of the trek that had gone into the jungle sort of 18 months previous. And this chap was a scientist who said that he was quite convinced that this was a important ancient city that had not yet been recognised by the government here, and he noted that the blocks of the structure he witnessed were enormous. They were he estimated somewhere in the region of 2 tons for each block, and the structure that we see images of is actually made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of these blocks. I mean, it's difficult to judge because the structure is still covered mostly by soil and plants. So, I mean, at the moment you can see one face of a pyramid, and so we're making judgments based on what we see. So then from there, we were able to access further images and video of the site, thanks to this other person. And he also provided us the details of the family who appear to be the real discoverers of the site. And they are based in a small village just on the edge of the jungle, and they've known about this site for, we understand, at least a couple of decades, and that the chap who guided them had taken them directly there, knowing where this city was, and has some considerable knowledge of the site. So we spoke to him also, and we have made some arrangements to meet with him and interview him as well to get more of the background to this. But we can certainly say that that's the current background to how we've become involved with this.
So what makes this place so much more different to other places that have been found, well, in the surrounding areas?
Well, there are a few sites in Ecuador that have been located, from ancient cultures, particularly the Inca and other civilizations that were coincided with the period of the Inca. And in these sites, you do not see the same megalithic blocks being used. In fact, I don't know of any sizable pyramids that have been uncovered in Ecuador. I mean, if you go down to Cuenca, you'll find that there's a couple of ancient sites. There's a kind of a sun temple on a hill there, and there's a few mounds which are remains of relatively small pyramids. There's been some other finds around the country, artifacts mainly, but in terms of major sites, actually Ecuador is really lacking, and I think this is partly to do with the government's lack of real enthusiasm to investigate, rather than a lack of sites here. Because of course across the border in Peru you find a significant number of large megalithic structures, whether pyramids or other buildings. So this particular site, though, the blocks and the style don't seem to match with what little has been identified in Ecuador. Certainly the style, if anything, is more reminiscent of structures that have been found in Peru.
They say that these tall men or giant people were also found in Loja and in Esmeraldas. Why do you think these people were here? I mean, what these civilizations have been, well, these giant skeletons have been found in different parts of the world, and we seem to be finding big skeletons, especially in Loja. Why do you think these beings, people, were here?
Yes, I mean, you're right in saying that, yes, there have been finds of remains of giants or evidence of giant constructions and tools for giants that, you know, all over the world. In Ecuador, there's been specific finds. There's parts of a skeleton were found down in Loja, which suggest a being of somewhere around, well, I think it was about 7.5 meters. And there's actually a model of the skeleton of this being has been constructed in the Mystery Park in Switzerland by Eric von Daniken, and so pictures of that can be found obviously online. There were also finds of tools for giants and other parts of remains over to the west from here to the coast in Esmeraldas. So we know that there's been remains of giants found around Ecuador, and there's legends of giants. Specifically why they were here, I would suggest it's to do with gold. I mean, one thing we know is that the infamous collection of artifacts known as the Father Crespi collection, which was found apparently in a place called the Taos Caves, also in Ecuador, which contain numerous gold artifacts, gold plates, engraved, you know, cups and things. Many of these seem to have representations of Sumerian deities or Sumerian beings. Indeed, some have Sumerian writing on them. So there's a strange tie-in, if you like, with the Sumerian culture, which has a tie-in to the ancient alien subject. Directly stated in many of the Sumerian texts is these gods, the Anunnaki, and apparently the Anunnaki had a strong interest in gold. Well, one thing we know about the region where this city is that it's very close to the banks of a river known for its gold deposits. So our suspicion at this point is that this was a city of gold. Certainly it was a mining operation for gold, and that the link in there with the Taos Caves artifacts, which are not too far away as far as we understand these caves, would suggest again that there's this tie-in to the Sumerians, to the Anunnaki, and to this harvesting of gold.
This place where the pyramid is, or the wall of the pyramid that's been uncovered, is it an easy place to access? What is it like to get there?
No, it's actually it's in one of the most hostile, inhospitable parts of Ecuador. In a jungle that is recognized to be the most dangerous jungle in the country. Many expeditions have gone in there looking for lost cities and pyramids or Inca gold, and a lot of these never come back out, or they experience, you know, horrific problems. There's a couple of reasons for this. I mean, partly the area is very swampy. There's cliffs and crags and mountains in there. You have sudden changing weather patterns. I mean, you can suddenly find that instead of sun, you're in heavy fog banks or torrential rain. And when you're already in a swampy area, you can imagine this can turn into a disaster quite quickly. Really, only experienced people of the tribes around that area can navigate safely. I mean, even if you go in with maps and GPS, there's no guarantee that you won't experience some kind of natural problem in there, be it with the weather or what have you, which could turn you around. And we have heard that even GPS sometimes malfunctions within this area. So it's a fairly inhospitable place. And one of the reasons why this city hasn't been found countless times by people is this fact that most people in Ecuador would never dare to do more than a few meters into that area of the jungle.
Okay, so it's easy to say that if you go with the best guide and go looking for the city, it's quite reasonable to sort of say that you may not find it.
Yeah, you may not find it. I mean, I mean, great adventurers, have gone into that region. People that would consider themselves, very experienced, and they've, disappeared. So it's a dangerous area. I mean, certainly I wouldn't recommend that anyone out there who feels that they know roughly where it is just goes searching around in the jungle for it, because it is a dangerous place.
And how big do you think, just your impression from what you've seen, how big do you think the pyramid complex or city could be, and do you think there would be others in the surrounding area?
From what I understand, at least one of the witnesses says that the specific pyramid that's been identified is around about 80 meters square base, with a steeply inclined wall that goes up around 80 meters. So you're talking about a large pyramid, and that in the area around it there were around about a dozen hills that would be approximately the same size. So the assumption is that you've got at least a dozen of these large pyramid structures. Amongst the rest of the foliage, there seem to be other parts which could be smaller buildings, and there's debris strewn around, including sort of pottery shards and stuff. So I mean, it's hard to say the exact size of the entire complex, but I'd say it was a significant size if it houses a dozen of these very large pyramids. I mean, for some comparison, I mean that would make them comparable with the third most sizable pyramid in Egypt, like the three Great Pyramids. It'd make it fairly comparable in size to that. So anyone who's been to Egypt would get an idea that it's a pretty big pyramid that we're talking about.
Do you think once this place is discovered properly and mapped and put on satellite for people to see, do you think it could be another Cusco waiting to be discovered?
Yeah, I'm sure that once it's all mapped and that people have a good idea where it is, and that that I suppose some of the infrastructure is put in to make it more accessible. I mean, I would suggest from what I've seen that some kind of gravelling of muddy areas, and swamps and boards put in over swamps. That it could be made into an area you could go in and study. Or tourists could go in and access. I mean, at the moment, I think only the most intrepid explorers and people that have experience of trekking or visiting jungle locations would be able to sort of make this. I mean, I certainly think that there's already the potential there for people, if they want to come out here and see the site, that in the next month or two, that we could probably start to organise something with the family that know the site. But I would sort of caution that it's not for the frail and infirm. It's a difficult trek.
Yeah. So it's fair to say that this city was built in that location on purpose.
Well, in reference to the gold again, yeah, that we think that it was to do with the presence of gold in the river there. I would suspect, though, that when it was built, the jungle probably was not as dense around it. Obviously, jungle grows pretty fast, but we know that it's about a 3-hour hike into the jungle. So, I mean, my suspicion is that the jungle was not, it was overgrown in that area. That probably before it may have been a short walk to the edge of the jungle, but over the centuries, the jungle has expanded and it's been swallowed. So it seems unlikely to me they would have built it in a place that at that time was inhospitable and dangerous. So I'm assuming that this jungle has expanded since that point.
Okay.
Probably over centuries, if not millennia.
Sure. Okay. Any further comments or observations that you'd like to add?
Well, yeah. I mean, we have to sort of consider the local legends and some of the stories that are floating around. In our understanding, not too far from this city, there is a sacred meeting place for the tribes. I mean, whether they still meet there or not, I'm not too sure, but that in the past there were tribes that would come from all over Latin America, so as far away as Brazil, and they would come to this place for these gatherings. And the reason for this was that they actually believed that this was the true centre of the world and the true equator.
Okay.
Arguably, now science puts the equator up sort of north a bit of us towards Quito, but the tribes held that this was the true centre of the world, and in that same area there were some caves that were considered special also, and in those caves were found a large catch of bones. And we know one person we spoke to here said that their father actually went into those caves and saw the bones and noted that some of them were femurs from very large humans that again would have to say giant-sized humans, that their leg bones were kind of in amongst the remains of normal human beings. So you have this, and then you have the fact that just local stories of lost cities in the jungle in that area and of a civilization of ancient giants. So this is information that's all floating around amongst the local people.
Okay. Personally, on a very personal note, what would you like to see happen with this information on this lost city, and how would you like it to be presented to the world?
Well, I suppose I'd like to see it, the site recognised for its importance. I think the government here should recognise it. I also think that it should probably attain a more international status, a protective status, as a an important site to the whole world, really. I mean, particularly if it's as old as some of us suspect, which may be that it goes back to what we call Atlantean times. It's possible that it could be 12,000 years old, such as some of the sites that have turned up in the world, such as in Turkey and in Japan and in Bolivia, that have evidence to suggest that they're from 12,000 years ago. If it goes back to that time, of course, it's one of the most important sites in the world. So I'd like to see it, properly protected, and also opened up to the public, and as well as that, to see that that the research is done correctly there, with an open mind by professionals, both mainstream archaeologists and alternative historians.
Thank you very much. It's been very interesting, and I hope that the rest of the video will be viewed by many.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
What appears at first glance to be simply jungle floor gives way to the multiple machete blows revealing large stone blocks with smooth surfaces. It becomes quite obvious that we are seeing part of a long abandoned and unexcavated megalithic structure. As the camera pans to the right, we notice a very interesting block with perfectly straight edges. This unique stone actually forms part of the corner of two interceding walls. It looks almost machine cut. Panning further to the right, we can now see that there is one entire wall that has already been cleared. This was not from an excavation, rather the result of a landslide. The revealed blocks are still all irregular shaped and interlock perfectly. One visitor to the complex, a scientist, estimated that each block weighed approximately 2 tons, and the angle of the slope is around 60 degrees. A close-up shot reveals what appears to be some kind of mortar or cement between the blocks. It looks like the material was vitrified, or the stone itself has been melted by intense heat. Presumably years of rain has washed away the bonding material between most of the blocks. We also note that the blocks on the exposed slope appear very worn by rain, unlike those newly uncovered, suggesting several centuries of water flow. A fascinating structure indeed. But this is not all, as there are many stone artifacts at the site, such as enormous stone hammerheads far too big for practical use by the typical Inca man who stood at around 5 foot. Now see the same stone tool compound compared with an unidentified object found inside a tunnel underneath the Bosnian pyramid. Itself, the pyramid has been estimated to be between 12 and 20,000 years old. They seem eerily similar. Judge for yourself.